D-Day. Thousands of American soldiers are poised to strike against a well-prepared enemy with formidable defenses. But this isn't Normandy, it's the island of Saipan, and the brutal battle here will bring total war to the Pacific. By late 1943, Japan is on the defensive in the Pacific. In September, they retreat to a national defense zone as part of a strategy to retain most of their conquered territories, rebuild their military strength, and safeguard crucial supply routes to Japan and its island garrisons. Under their new operational policy, every island must be defended to the last man. General Douglas MacArthur, commander of the U.S. Southeast Pacific area, favors liberating the Philippines before advancing toward Japan. However, U.S. Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Ernest King views the scattered Japanese-occupied islands, some of which could serve as bases for long-range B-29 bombers, as stepping stones on a more direct path to the Japanese home islands. In the end, the U.S. pursues both approaches, with Admiral Chester Nimitz spearheading the Central Pacific Offensive. The Fifth Fleet is set to launch an assault on Japanese-held islands in the Marianas Carolines Palau region. While some heavily fortified garrisons will be bypassed, a handful of islands must be taken for air bases. Suitable islands could almost be counted on the fingers of two hands. These, naturally, the Japanese, had developed as bases, and there were no more. So when we moved across the Pacific, and needed an air base, there was no alternative. We simply had to take one away from the Japanese. It's just that simple. Rear Admiral Harry W. Hill, Horn Fisher 20. Stretching roughly 750 kilometers across the Central Pacific, the Mariana Islands lie at the heart of Japan's national defense zone, with critical air bases on Guam, Saipan, and Tinian. While Saipan and Tinian were pre-war Japanese colonies primarily focused on sugar cane cultivation, large-scale Japanese settlement had reduced the indigenous Chamorro population to a minority. Meanwhile, Guam, a U.S. territory, was invaded and occupied by Japan in 1941. Admiral Raymond Spruance, commander of the Fifth Fleet, plans to seize Saipan and Tinian first, establish U.S. air bases, and then move on to Guam. The V Amphibious Corps, composed of the 2nd and 4th Marine Divisions, along with the supporting 27th Infantry Division and Ziv Corps Artillery, will spearhead the assault on Saipan. U.S. planners designate 4 beaches for the landings, codenamed Red, Green, Blue, and Yellow, along the southwestern coast. However, the 2 attacking Marine divisions will be divided by a Fetna Point, and reefs near the shoreline restrict landing craft operations. To overcome these obstacles, the assault waves prioritize the use of LVTs, landing vehicles, tracked, which can traverse the reefs and drive directly onto the beaches. In an unusual move, V Amphibious Corps orders the Marines to remain in the LVTs as they push inland rather than dismounting on the beaches. While the 4th Marine Division supports this plan, the 2nd Marine Division remains skeptical, recalling the difficulties LVTs faced with rugged terrain on Guadalcanal. Their rivalry with the Army LVT drivers also fuels tensions. V Amphibious Corps Commander General Holland Smith expects the Marines to reach the objective, 3 kilometers inland, by the end of D-Day. He anticipates swift progress in the south, followed by a final push northward. In total, around 95,000 U.S. troops stand ready to assault and garrison the island. Japanese defenses on Saipan. Japanese Admiral Chuchi Nagumo is responsible for defending the Mariana Islands. Once the commander of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor and Midway, Nagumo has since fallen out of favor with the Imperial Navy. On the ground, General Yoshitsugu Saito commands a local garrison of approximately 32,000 troops, drawn from the 43rd Division and the 41st Independent Mixed Brigade, alongside some air and naval personnel. However, they are poorly prepared. While the inland high ground provides excellent artillery observation and defensive positioning, the Japanese forces suffer from shortages of transport, manpower, and coordination. Reinforcements arrived in May, but U.S. submarines intercepted and sank several supply and troop transport ships. This exacerbates the already fragile relationship between the Japanese Army and Navy. Despite these setbacks, Saito divides Saipan into 4 defensive zones and stations his artillery on the high ground to counter the landings. Correctly anticipating a U.S. landing in the southwest, he readies the 9th Tank Regiment for a rapid counterattack. While the Army organizes the island's defenses, the Navy devises Operation A-Go. The first mobile fleet, including Japan's most modern carriers, will sail to the Marianas to strike the U.S. invasion fleet. Supported by land-based aircraft, Japan hopes to inflict a crippling blow on Allied operations in the Pacific. Concerned about this threat, Spruance orders Task Force 58, his fast carrier force, to remain in a defensive posture, much to the frustration of its commander, Admiral Mark Mitchell, who favors aggressive action. Preparations for D-Day on Saipan. Just 1 week after Allied troops storm the beaches of Normandy, U.S. forces in the Pacific prepare for their own D-Day. In terms of firepower, the naval armada assembled for Saipan surpasses even that of Operation Overlord in Europe. 3 days before the invasion, U.S. warships and aircraft unleash a bombardment on Japanese airfields and defenses across Guam, Tinian, and Saipan. White phosphorus is also fired into Saipan's sugarcane fields in a failed attempt to burn them clear. Japanese civilian Shizuko Miura recalls witnessing the bombardment. "I gazed at the sky for the enemy plane. It was a great formation which seemed to consist of hundreds, no, many thousands. Until war came to Saipan, I had never seen a dead man's face. So I might not have known death. But before my eyes, these 2 soldiers lay dead as if to teach me, look, this is death itself." Hornfisher 76, 79 U.S. firepower devastates the towns of Garapan and Charinkanoa, eliminates coastal defenses, and disrupts Japanese communications. However, the naval bombardment proves less effective than hoped, as battleship crews are primarily trained to hit targets at sea. Meanwhile, underwater demolition teams survey the beaches and mark channels for larger landing vessels. D-Day on Saipan. Before the main invasion on June 15, the Marines launched diversionary feints in the north to mislead the Japanese, but the defenders are not deceived. At approximately 8:40 a.m., the first assault wave, composed of Marines and Army amphibious tractor battalions, heads for the beaches. A staggering 700 landing craft and LVTs, including amphibious tanks and various gunboat, rocket, and command variants, will deliver 8,000 Marines in the initial wave. Fire support from ships and aircraft continues until the LVTs are within 100 meters of shore, but the plan immediately runs into complications. As the LVTs cross the reefs, Japanese fire intensifies. Unforeseen tidal currents push the 2nd Marine Division northward, causing units to land on the wrong beaches, creating dangerous gaps and congestion. The Japanese defenders, well prepared and largely unaffected by the preliminary bombardment, unleash devastating artillery and mortar fire on the crowded beaches. Despite heavy losses, within 20 minutes, the first wave of Americans is ashore. However, difficult terrain and the need to consolidate their forces slow their advance. Although 98% of the 4th Marine Division's LVTs make it to shore, only half manage to push 300 meters inland. U.S. amphibious tanks also struggle. Some are immobilized by heavy surf, while others become bogged down in the fighting at Charinkanoa. Despite destroying 11 counterattacking Japanese tanks, few reach their designated objectives on schedule. Meanwhile, logistical operations come under fire as Marine depot companies, including many African American Marines, are targeted by Japanese mortars and bypass defenders. Saipan is only the beginning. The battle for the Pacific is far from over.